Hello there, my freedom-loving friend. Welcome to my JP Reacts channel, where you and I get to watch videos together as I react, calling out the lies and corruption of tyrants, the absurdities of woke culture, and also highlighting the amazing work of other freedom fighters. Today, we've got a video from someone I really consider an amazing freedom fighter, and he's calling out the lies and corruption of tyrants. This is Tucker Carlson. And I'll tell you something about him in just a second, but this is a video, to me it's a masterful compilation where he's showing us the potential dire consequences of what will happen in this country if we continue implementing the Green New Deal. Sounds good on paper, right? Why does the World Economic Forum want everybody to do this? Oh, control. Poverty is how they control. Cool. So the Green New Deal has already destroyed countries. Ghana, Sri Lanka, just happened, South Africa, and the Netherlands is currently in process. So these countries that go from thriving, having plenty of energy, to being stripped of their energy, and that leads to now everybody lives in poverty, doesn't have energy, and doesn't have food. And it's a recipe to create exactly what it creates. But of course, the Green New Deal, it's presented, I mean, to me, it just getting down to brass tacks. The Green New Deal, in my opinion, is from the World Economic Forum and all their friends, meant to disempower people, put them into poverty so they can control them. But it's presented as this is good for the environment, and like, look at this, green energy will replace all the fossil fuels. Everything will be the same, promise. Your energy will just be coming from a different place. And for the environment, we're going to do this. Sign on the dotted line, please. By the way, we're going to kind of capture your leaders of your country, so they'll sign it. You don't have to. You're going to have to go along with it. Before we get into this, I just want to share, you may have seen it if I posted elsewhere about it a couple weeks ago, but I had a chance to sit down with Tucker Carlson. He interviewed me for his Tucker Carlson Today show, and you can check that out. It's on the, I think, Fox Nation app, or if you subscribe to their channel. I don't even know how to get it. It's just, I did the interview. I don't know how to get it. If you're smarter than me, you can, if you want to. But you can check that interview out if you want. It was a joy to sit down with him. But the reason why I'm telling you about that is getting to know Tucker Carlson a little bit in person. I'm so impressed with the guy. First, I think he's highly intelligent. I know his heart is in the right spot. But what really impressed me about him is how genuine and kind he is as a person, which tells me truly about his heart. So meeting him, not only did he treat me with, remarkable kindness, respect, and authenticity, but I saw him treat everybody that way. Like someone serving coffee, he's treating them amazingly. And that kind of thing is one of the biggest markers of character, because it's easy to treat people with respect when you want something from them. You want to manipulate how they see you. But when you watch people, how they treat the waiters, how they treat the quote unquote little people, when they treat the little people as though they're big people, that's amazing. I'm not talking about the vertically impaired community, by the way. So this, in my opinion, I watched it last night, but I want to watch it here with you. It's a stellar, frightening, but you can't get out of jail, you don't know you're in kind of thing, report on what happens to us in the U.S. if we allow the Green New Deal to go into effect. So in other words, if we just keep complying with the crazy leftist people that want to destroy our lives and use the propaganda of it's for the climate and your lives are going to get better. If we allow that, here's what's going to happen. Let's take a look.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Imagine you went to school with Sandy Cortez. A lot of people did. Imagine it's 2011 and you're both students at Boston University.
Seeing her picture makes me want to throw up.
Not quite prestigious, but highly expensive school for kids who couldn't get into Tufts. You know who Sandy Cortez is because 3 days a week at 12:20, you see her in your philosophy of gender and sexuality class. She's always there in the front row snapping her gum. And then like clockwork, she never misses your queer theory seminar, which meets every Thursday at 3:30 p.m. because if there's one thing about queer theory scholars, they're not early risers. Sandy goes to both and she talks a lot in both classes. She jumps into the conversation whenever she feels she has something important to say, which is frequently. She's hardly a genius, but she is highly self-assured. She's got strong opinions about racism and cosmetics. She seems to spend a lot of time updating her Facebook page. Those are the main things that you remember about Sandy Cortez.
Tucker is so funny. Like he's setting context. Like you'll see why he's talking about AOC in a second. But if there's one thing that just gets my funny bone, it's when someone who stands for freedom is using wit, sarcasm, and humor to jab at the tyrants. And I think Tucker does a masterful job at it. He's one of my favorite comedians.
Now, fast forward 10 years. Suddenly, Sandy Cortez is a world-famous figure, somehow. She's calling herself Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, like some kind of female Che, Westchester County's first socialist revolutionary. And she's still yammering on about racism and eyeshadow, her twin obsessions. And she's still frantically updating her social media pages. Some things have not changed. But other things have changed. One night, you're watching TV and you see Sandy Cortez talking authoritatively about America's energy grid. Like she knows a lot about it. And that stops you in your tracks. Wait a second. The energy grid? That's an adult thing, right? That's not queer theory. That's real. That's a very complicated piece of infrastructure.
The energy grid isn't queer theory. Now, queer theory is equally as important as the energy grid. So don't get me wrong. Queer theory is my current thing that I stand for. We need to elect leaders based on queer theory.
Theory, that's real. That's a very complicated piece of infrastructure. Even a lot of engineers don't really understand how the energy grid works. How could Sandy Cortez possibly know anything about that? She can't drive a standard transmission. She can't program a coffee maker. She doesn't even make her own bed in the morning. The energy grid? Please. It seems preposterous. So you grab a beer and you settle in to watch her talk about it. And your jaw hangs open as you do. Here's what you see.
We know that there is no...
I have to say she looks way better wearing a mask. Now, I'm not a mask kind of guy, but I fully support AOC wearing a mask. Can we mandate AOC wearing a mask for our protection? All right, JP, you immature bastard. Let's get to the point.
We know that there is no such thing as cheap energy because the price of cheap energy has always been our lives.
The trampling of indigenous rights is a cause of climate change.
The trampling of indigenous rights is a cause of climate change. So you have this thing, indigenous rights, like, cool, that's important. And then it's this out of left field, no logical, and that causes climate change.
The trampling of racial justice is a cause of climate change.
Racial injustice causes climate change. I'd like to see the Fauci science behind that.
The trampling of racial justice is a cause of climate change.
We're like, the world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change. And your biggest issue is, how are we going to pay for it? And like, this is the war. This is our World War II.
The fossil fuel industry and the future of humanity are fundamentally incompatible. They just are. I mean, that's not a political opinion. That is the science. We continue to burn fossil fuels, our planet will become inhabitable.
The fossil fuel industry and the future of humanity are incompatible. So that's maybe why she's trying to destroy the future of humanity. So, setting the tone, because spoiler alert, I watched this video. We will see in a second how eliminating fossil fuels destroys the future of humanity because it's happening in other countries. It's caused the destruction of humanity. Now, this isn't like fossil fuels, so we should just pollute everything. It's not saying that.
Really? Energy, huh? How's energy generated? Do you know? What's a watt? What's amperage? Speak slowly. We've got time. But she doesn't. Instead, she goes, the fossil fuel industry and the future of humanity are fundamentally incompatible. They just are. I mean, that's not a political opinion. That's the science. Of course it is. That's the science. Whatever I say is the science. There's no debate here. Obey. But that's not how democracy works. Thank God. You actually have to convince people. And so she introduced the Green New Deal 3 years ago. And it didn't go far. In fact, it went nowhere. In fact, virtually nobody in Congress supported it. In fact, when it came time for a vote on the Green New Deal, even her co-sponsor, the other guy who wrote it, the super woke senator from Massachusetts, voted present, not in favor. Now, why is that? Why did nobody actually support it? Well, because if you think cow flatulence is even in the top 200 top issues for most Americans, you're Sandy Cortez. Go back to queer theory class. Get rid of fossil fuels? Yeah, what then? Well, starvation, poverty, societal collapse. Voters, it turns out, are not into any of those things. And so nothing that resembles the Green New Deal is going to pass the United States Congress in our lifetimes, provided this remains an actual democracy, which is to say, provided the public has anything to say about how they're governed.
It's a good disclaimer, provided it remains a democracy. That's an important thing we don't want to take for granted.
So that's a non-starter here. It's never going to happen by democratic means. But that doesn't mean it can't happen. It doesn't mean that ideologues can't impose the Green New Deal on weaker countries that are too poor to refuse it.
That is not democracy. That is tyranny, ladies and gentlemen, and queer theoretical species.
And over the past several years, that's exactly what they've done. So the Green New Deal has actually taken effect around the world. So we don't have to guess about what would happen if it took effect here. We can know. That's science. Let's start with Ghana. Ghana's a pretty little country, peaceful place, actually, on the west coast of Africa. 3 years ago, Ghana was in great shape. It had one of the fastest growing economies in the world. In fact, it had so much energy over most of the last decade, it was exporting it to its neighbors in West Africa. Now, those energy exports from Ghana peaked in 2014. Why that year? Well, because the next year, the World Bank published this headline on its website, quote, World Bank approves largest ever guarantees for Ghana's energy transformation. Ooh, when they promise to transform your energy, slow down. But Ghana didn't slow down.
No, we're getting trans identities in the energy sector. Doesn't work too well.
Transform your energy, slow down. But Ghana didn't slow down. They just kept going. And the World Bank promised to provide, and we're quoting, technical assistance for energy sector reforms and the drafting of a new renewable energy law. So in return for all this help, Ghana agreed to limit its carbon emissions. And then they entered the Paris Climate Agreement. Oh, how virtuous. What happened next? This is the part you don't read that much about. Last year, Ghana experienced a complete shutdown of its national power supply. Oh, no more electricity. No emissions because we have no electricity. And blackouts have continued since then. Just yesterday, a news source in Ghana reported that, quote, residents in parts of the Ashanti region who have been hit with power cuts are without water as well. Because it turns out you need electricity to provide water, also to grow food. Now, this is not a small thing. The Ashanti region has millions of people living in it. They're all now living in the Stone Age. And it's not just the energy grid that's now compromised in Ghana. International observers say the country is now facing severe food shortages and hunger, starvation within a matter of months. Why is that? It's a fertile country, hardworking people. Well, now they're running out of fertilizer. Why? Well, because for years, Sandy Cortez's friends in the NGO community pushed Ghana toward less efficient, more expensive organic fertilizers. And the government of Ghana, because it's not a rich government, caved. Last year, according to Ghana's news service, Ghana's agricultural minister, quote, urged local farmers to adopt an organic agriculture system to reduce the impact of climate change.
So my idiot summary here is the tyrant stepped in and said, hey, Ghana, doing good. How would you like to do even better? They're like, who doesn't want to do better? Cool. So to be part of our Green New Deal, and we'll give you some kind of guarantees, it won't mean really anything, you've got to agree to do carbon emissions cutting. How's that sound? Sounds good. Cool. So how we're going to do that, we're going to transition you to green energy. We don't really know how to do that, but we'll transition you from green energy. But more important than how you're actually going to get green energy that you're not going to get is you have to cut out your regular energy production using regular fertilizers, because all that stuff reduces carbon emissions. How does that sounds like a good thing. Exactly. So why wouldn't you sign? Then they sign it. So legally, they can't make their own energy in a way that actually works. So they sign it. It's illegal for them to make energy that way because it creates carbon emissions. They sign the deal, and they don't have the green energy to actually produce power, therefore get water, use the fertilizers they're accustomed to, therefore get food. Poverty, starvation, and lack of water.
Oh, what happened then? Well, the good people of Ghana, while they feel good about their fight against climate change, are now starving. And in June, last month, police in Ghana used water and tear gas to attack hundreds of demonstrators in Accra, which is the capital of Ghana. Now, it's not just Ghana. The same thing just happened in Sri Lanka. In 2016, the World Economic Forum published an article by a Columbia professor called Joseph Stiglitz, one of the dumbest people on planet Earth, urging Ghana to transition to, quote, high productivity organic farming. Now, what does Stiglitz know about farming? Ever farmed? No. But he felt strongly that Sri Lanka should try a new kind of farming, and of course sold it to Sri Lankans as a pathway to prosperity. In 2015, the World Economic Forum published an article on its website entitled, and we're quoting, "This is how we will make Sri Lanka rich by 2025. You can search for that article, but it's gone now, along with the government of Sri Lanka. So they had an actual insurrection, not January 6th, not a guy in horns and a bearskin running around on mushrooms making weird noises. No, an actual insurrection, where they like come to your house and swim in your swimming pool, root through your sock drawer and make you leave.
Ladies and gentlemen, the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab's humanitarian organization, steps in, makes an agreement with Sri Lanka. Their president at the time, who was just ousted, was under the thumb of the World Economic Forum. So he agreed to this deal that would make Sri Lanka poor, very controllable. I am beginning to not trust the World Economic Forum and that Klaus Schwab doesn't have our best interests at heart. Well, that doesn't make any sense because they tell us they have our best interests at heart. If he's evil, like you're saying, wouldn't they be honest with us and tell us they don't have their best interest at heart? But what if evil people are willing to lie? They wouldn't do that.
That's what they did to the people who run Sri Lanka, they being the public. The turning point came in 2021 when the president of Sri Lanka, acting on advice from the World Economic Forum, banned the use and importation of chemical fertilizers. Now, the problem was virtually every farm in Sri Lanka used those fertilizers to produce food, which it turns out people need every day in order to survive. Weird. As a result of that move, food prices in Sri Lanka nearly doubled. Millions more Sri Lankans now live in poverty, which is not a joke. And because the economy has collapsed, Sri Lanka now cannot afford fuel imports. So Sri Lankans are now waiting days for gasoline. Watch.
36-year-old Thuvan, an auto rickshaw driver, has spent 2 nights at this gas station in central Colombo. It's been an endless wait to refuel his 3-wheeler. Petrol pumps are all but dry across the city.
At every petrol station we go to, they tell us they have run out of gas.
With no fuel, Thuvan has been out of work. He leaves his rickshaw in the care of friends and heads home to meet family, where the situation is equally dire. There's been a crippling shortage of cooking gas across the island nation. Thuvan's wife Fatima has been cooking on a kerosene stove for the last 3 months.
I only have this one bottle of kerosene left. It'll finish after I heat the food tonight.
What's so interesting is millions of people are now really suffering. The government just fell in Sri Lanka. Now, no one in Sri Lanka is white. They're all what our Democratic Party would call people of color. And yet the American intellectuals who pushed that disaster in Sri Lanka, who are responsible for the suffering there, have escaped all culpability. No one is saying a word about it. Meanwhile, a cop in Minneapolis was rough with a convicted felon 2 years ago, and we have to stop everything and send him to prison for life. But Joseph Stiglitz is totally fine. And it's not just happening, by the way, in the third world. It's happening even in rich countries. The Netherlands, for example, which is a very rich country.
Real quick before we get to that, something I just can't comprehend is Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum, and everybody else associated with their agenda, how they can live with themselves. Like you just saw a woman say, I have enough kerosene to make one more meal for my family. There's hunger's rising in that country. Seeing women, children, families suffering, knowing they're causing that, I do not know how these World Economic Forum people and these tyrants can live with themselves. The whole idea of like there's a reptilian race here for global domination, that I don't know, it starts to make sense to me. It's like, cool, because like if you have human emotions, even if you're greedy, even if you are objectively a bad person, you're going to have a conscience. You're going to have a human soul that gives you empathy for not only people suffering, but prevents you from causing the suffering of people. These tyrants lack that. So they behave more like reptiles than humans. Therefore, the reptilian race, I don't know if that's true or not. It doesn't really matter because they behave like reptiles. I don't understand how they can even remotely live with themselves.
In the third world. It's happening even in rich countries. The Netherlands, for example, which is a very rich country, the second biggest food exporter in the world, tried to do, for reasons that are not clear, but may have to do with Western guilt, the same thing that leaders in Sri Lanka tried to do. They just ordered farmers to cut virtually all of their nitrogen oxide emissions to, quote, save the environment. Now, doing that would shutter most farms in the Netherlands and destroy the country's food supply. And once again, that led to riots. So everything that's happened in Sri Lanka and Ghana and the Netherlands is happening at the behest, not simply of ideologues, but of some of the largest financial institutions in the world. They want more of this. It's why Ghana has achieved a near perfect ESG environmental impact score of 97.7. According to World Economic Research, Sri Lanka has an ESG score of 98.1. The Netherlands, 90.7. So the poorer you get, the more human suffering there is, the higher your ESG score.
That equation, like, hey, Netherlands, Sri Lanka, all these, quit making food, quit farming food. Why? Because it'll cut carbon emissions. Won't that create starvation and kill people? Yeah, but depopulation is part of our agenda, so quit farming.
And that's important because companies will not invest unless you have a high ESG score. Interesting. So these countries have no choice. And that's why South Africa, for example, worked so hard to get an ESG score that now totals 91. Now, that effort began in 2015 when South Africa switched to renewables. Now, how did that work? Well, like everything in South Africa, no one in America really wants to know. It's their favorite country. It's a huge success. What's life like in South Africa for people of all colors? Stop. Well, The Guardian, of all places, reported at the time, when we're quoting, Solar, biomass, and wind energy systems are popping up all over the country and feeding the clean energy into the strained electrical grid. So their grid's been falling apart since 1994, but no problem. The green energy geniuses are going to save South Africa. How'd that work? Well, 7 years later, the Washington Post reports that South Africa regularly experiences, quote, rolling blackouts that last 8 hours or more, crippling economic activity and disrupting life in this nation of 60 million people. And that's true. Ask anyone who lives there. It's falling apart. It doesn't work. Also true in France. France is committed to renewable energy. How's that working? Well, France currently has an ESG environmental score of 92.6. Why? Because 10 years ago, France pledged to derive a quarter of all of its energy from renewables. In 2018, these policies led to riots. Remember the so-called yellow jackets? People didn't like it. If you cared about democracy, you would listen to them, but no one in charge actually does, so they don't. And things have gotten worse since then. This past June, the heads of 3 French energy companies called on the public to, quote, immediately reduce consumption of fuel, oil, electricity, and gas amid shortages and soaring prices. Oh, stop civilization. It doesn't work. That same month, France's president publicly begged Joe Biden to start producing more oil because the Saudis cannot make enough to supply Europe. Watch.
2 things. One, I'm at the maximum. What he claims, and he told me this is my detailed commitment. Second, he told me, according to us, the Saudis can increase a little bit, but 150 or a little bit more, and they don't have huge capacities.
Look at Biden. He's just out to lunch. He's like, what day is it?
At this stage, before 6 months' time.
So only the Europeans have been dumb enough to embrace this. Unlike Ghana, they could afford not to, but they are anyway, out of some weird sense of collective guilt. So what's happening throughout Europe? In the UK, ESG score of 92.7, the National Infrastructure Commission has warned that as many as 6 million households could face power cuts this summer. Sound like the first world? No, it doesn't, but that's England now. In Germany, ESG score 90.2, the government is now rationing hot water due to an ongoing gas crisis. Officials in Hamburg, Germany's second largest city, just warned that, quote, warm water could only be made available at certain times of the day in an emergency. Now, it was just a few years ago that Germany's government laughed at warnings from Donald Trump that this would happen. It's on video. Oh, they are so stupid. You have no idea. Green energy is the future.
I think it was 2017, Donald Trump pulled the U.S. out of the Paris climate agreement. I fell for the propaganda at the time. I'm like, dude, Trump doesn't want the environment to be safe. Like he's just under the thumb of oil companies. I was wrong. Like Trump saw this. I think the reason why the media has been instructed to smear Trump since he started running for president is because he wasn't controllable to the tyrants, the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, who depend on capturing world leaders to agree to this stuff that will destroy their country, their economy, their energy, their food, so that that country is now controllable and needs the World Economic Forum's guidance. He knew, like, we can't control him. We got to smear him. Got to get rid of them. Because it sounds so good on paper. The green energy deal, the Paris climate agreement. We named this thing in such a way where if you're against it, the sheep are manipulated to think you are a bad person. So they don't see us being a bad person.
Every place that's been tried has fallen apart. Every single one, with no exceptions. Albania, Kenya, Argentina, Peru, Ecuador, Panama, Libya, so on. But it's not just a problem there, it's becoming a problem here. So in the United States, our ESG score on environmental issues currently stands at 58. But Joe Biden, who buys into every stupid trend, wants to change that. It's very important to get our ESG score up because we want to be more like Ghana. So at the very moment that Biden is sending our strategic petroleum reserve, which we own, he doesn't, to his son's business partners in China, he is vowing to end fossil fuels in this country and boost our ESG score. Watch.
Would there be any place for fossil fuels, including coal and fracking, in a Biden administration?
No, we would work it out. We would make sure it's eliminated and no more subsidies for either one of those. Either any fossil fuel. No more subsidies for fossil fuel industry. No more drilling on federal lands. No more drilling, including offshore. No ability for the oil industry to continue to drill, period. But I want you to look in my eyes. I guarantee you, we're going to end fossil fuel, and I am not going to cooperate with it, okay?
Sounds good if you don't think about it. But what Tucker Carlson is reporting on was happening in Ghana, Sri Lanka, in process in the Netherlands, these other countries he's mentioned. You get to see what will happen as we end fossil fuels. It's not desirable.
So let's just be really clear. Fossil fuels aren't just not bad. Fossil fuels aren't just a net good. Fossil fuels are the only thing that stands between the United States becoming Ghana. Fossil fuels are the only thing that make the United States a rich country and not a poor country. We have the largest recoverable oil reserves in the world. If we can't tap those, we will be Ghana. We will be poor. But Joe Biden doesn't care. And so he is clamping down on our ability to extract them. And like the leaders of every other country driven into the ground by green energy schemes thought up by morons like Sandy Cortez, he's taking no responsibility for the damage he has caused.
Look, we need more refining capacity.
This, first off, he looks like he's dead. Second, like we saw in his campaign speeches, he probably plagiarized, a second ago, how he's saying, no more drilling. No, we're going to end fossil fuels. And here's this idiot right now saying like, we need more capacity. We do, but also that goes against the thing you're saying. And ideally, we don't do the thing you're saying.
This idea that they don't have oil to drill and to bring up is simply not true. This piece of the Republicans talking about Biden shut down fields, wrong. 9,000 of them, okay? So then we ought to be able to work something out whereby they're able to increase refining capacity and still not give up on transitioning to renewable energy.
Does this clown, is his face loaded with Botox? Because it's like his forehead, that has a facial expression. It's cool, that's like natural. But then the rest of his stupid face, it's just like smooth. It doesn't look young, but it looks like expressionless. So like expressionless, expression of here. Hi, I'm the president. Let's see what else I have to say.
Problem is, he doesn't know anything about refining or extracting or how the grid works or anything about anything because he's never had a real job because he's worked for the federal government since he was in his 20s. None of these people have any experience doing anything. Again, most of them can't drive a manual transmission. So to get a lecture on the power grid or energy from people who have no idea what it is a bit much. And the topic is too important to continue to listen to their nonsense as we become poorer. And by the way, as the rifts just beneath the surface in American society are exacerbated by that poverty. As GDP drops, societal tension rises. It's dangerous. Back off. And it's accelerating. In the past year, the United States has experienced blackouts in some of our biggest states. Why? Because they're relying more and more on renewables. Places like California and even Texas. Just yesterday, in order to avoid a blackout, the largest grid operator in the state of Texas begged residents to turn up their thermostats, no more AC for you, and asked them not to use any major appliances. Really, in Texas, which has the largest oil and gas reserves in the continental United States. What are they doing in Texas? But across the country, this is true. Orlando, Florida recently experimented with fertilizer bans to, quote, curb pollution. So the World Economic Forum wants a lot more of this. They just released a position paper calling for countries to, quote, agree to end the underpricing of fossil fuels, which is the principal factor preventing a clean energy transition.
So what the World Economic Forum is saying is, we want you, nations, to agree to charge more for fuel, oil. Y'all know the prices are already escalated? Yeah. We want you to charge more so people can't use it. They can't farm, they can't work, they can't have food, they can't live. We don't want them to live. Okay, we'll raise prices. Sounds like a logical plan, Klaus Schwab.
Fossil fuels, which is the principal factor preventing a clean energy transition. In other words, it's too cheap. It works too well. Gas needs to be higher, so you won't be able to use it. So you'll have to be poor. And they're saying this as we're watching countries around the world, we could give you more detail, you see the point, are collapsing and entering into a state of revolution because these morons tampered with their energy grids. But they don't care. They're going to continue doing it unless someone stops them until exactly the same thing happens here.
There you have it. I love Tucker Carlson. I love this video. I don't love how I feel watching this video because honestly, it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to see the reality that's happening around the world, see the reality that's infiltrating our country through nefarious, corrupt means. But like G.I. Joe once said, knowing is half the battle. Like the old saying, you can't get out of a jail you don't know you're in. So for me, it's better to see the jail so we can do something about it, even though that's uncomfortable to see. That's one of the reasons why people love to stay asleep. Like, cool, it's pretty comfortable right now. Yeah, is that, no, don't tell me. Don't tell me. I'm pretty comfortable right now. That's not an awake person. So for me, this is very informative. I'm glad to know about it. And here's why. I can do something about it. We can do something about it. We can make sure we don't fall for the propaganda that tries to convince us like, oh, due to lower carbon emissions, you're a good person. Oh, you mean cause starvation? A little bit down the line. And then also, not complying is one of the most powerful acts. Because the only way the tyrannical maniacs that don't deserve control over your sovereignty, my sovereignty, and the well-being of our family, the only way they can control you is through your compliance. Because there's way more free, beautiful people than there are tyrants sitting in their little conference rooms with their expensive suits and little reptilian claws on the table and looking at each other like, do you hate life? Yeah, I hate life. I hate life too. Let's control these people. So I think we're better off knowing about this. And I think Tucker Carlson did a wonderful job compiling a lot of what's going on with the Green Deal and what will happen here, how U.S. will become a very poor, decimated country if we allow it. But that's our power, if we allow it. Or what happens if we don't allow it. It's great. So with that said, thank you for taking a gander at this video with me. I hope you enjoyed watching it. Probably got angry, probably got pissed, probably got afraid. Awesome, you're feeling your human emotions. That too is empowerment. So appreciate you watching with me. And if you want to help spread the freedom vibes through my new merch line, I've got new designs, all the old classics as well. If that's something you want to do, you can check out all the designs in my shop, only at awakenwithjp.com. But more importantly, new videos will be coming at you on this channel every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And until then, stay free, my friend.